A storm over Salem, Rockies, and the long, dark road ahead. The man once known for his reckless charm, volcanic temper, and surprising flashes of loyalty now finds himself behind bars, facing charges of aggravated assault and attempted murder. His cousin and longtime rival, Philip Kiriakis, lies in a hospital bed, barely clinging to life after a brutal altercation that has rocked both the Kiriakis family and the town of Salem. For a man who spent years trying to outrun his past, Xander has run headlong into the consequences he thought he'd left behind. And as the legal and emotional fallout widens, the future looks increasingly bleak. The descent began in the quietest of places, the study of the Kiriakis mansion. Maggie Horton, the family's moral cornerstone, confronted Xander with the kind of warning that only matriarchs know how to deliver. Quiet, clear, and final. Her concern wasn't for Xander, but for her niece Sarah and young baby Victoria, whose safety she believed was in jeopardy. She had forgiven much in the past, but this time, she would do whatever it took to protect them. Behind her calm voice was a steely resolve honed by decades of personal tragedy and hard choices. It was the last chance she gave him. He didn't take it. The breaking point came in the form of a violent confrontation between Xander and Philip. Their rivalry had always simmered under the surface, two cousins circling the same power, the same legacy with vastly different temperaments. When Philip attempted to stop a reckless scheme involving a stolen hospital drug, the confrontation escalated beyond words. By the time hotel security arrived, Philip was bleeding and unconscious, and Xander had disappeared into the night. Philip was rushed to Salem University Hospital with injuries so severe that doctors worked through the night just to keep him alive. Broken ribs, punctured lung, organ damage that left his prognosis uncertain. Outside the intensive care unit, family members gathered in silence and fury. Kate Roberts, Philip's fiercely protective mother, was inconsolable. Brady Black stood vigil, his expression haunted. Belle whispered reassurances that no one believed. And then, as dawn broke, Detective Jada Hunter arrived with an arrest warrant and placed Xander in cuffs right there in the corridor, watched by half the town. The legal case against him is already formidable. Even without Philip's testimony, the district attorney's office has a long list of evidence and a longer memory. Every crime Xander thought he had buried, black market dealings, kidnappings, forged identities, and a fatal night at the docks, will be resurrected and laid bare in court. Bail, if granted, will likely be set beyond reach. His corporate assets are frozen. His name is toxic, and his most important relationships are unraveling in real time. Sarah Horton, once his anchor and his fiercest defender, is now openly discussing divorce. Friends report she's considering leaving Salem entirely, taking Victoria somewhere far from the wreckage of the Kiriakis empire. Maggie, who once saw the best in Xander, now sits in grief, knowing she helped trigger the very downfall she tried to prevent. Meanwhile, Kate is reportedly determined to push for the maximum penalty, and if Philip awakens, she will push him to testify, even if it risks driving a wedge between mother and son. With both Xander and Philip out of commission, Titan Industries is spiraling. The boardroom is leaderless, stock prices are wobbling, and sharks are circling. Other Salem power players are already maneuvering for control, and hostile takeovers are no longer a whisper, they're a threat. As the town speculates about what comes next, a series of grim possibilities take shape. Xander could be convicted and sentenced to Statesville Penitentiary, where he would serve a decade or more. He could become another forgotten name in a long line of Salem inmates, broken, bitter, and erased from the lives of those he once loved. For a man whose deepest fear is abandonment, the slow loss of Sarah and Victoria might be the cruelest punishment of all. Alternatively, there's a darker theory that someone loyal to Kate might exact revenge before the courts do. Accidents in prison. Unfortunate transport malfunctions. For all her civility, Kate has powerful friends and a history of protecting her son at all costs. Still others whisper of a redemptive ending. Especially among fans who suspect that Xander's portrayer may soon exit the show. In this scenario, he sacrifices himself in a dramatic act, perhaps saving Philip or shielding a hospital patient during a future crisis. It would be the final, definitive gesture of a man seeking to redeem a life of violence with one last moment of selflessness. And then there's the escape theory. Some believe Xander will flee Salem aided by old mercenary contacts or remnants of his criminal past. If that happens, he will become a ghost, damned by his family name, hunted by the law, remembered only in scandal. Yet no matter which ending arrives, one thing is certain: the Xander Kiriakis who once walked through the Kiriakis mansion with swagger and smirks, convinced he could talk his way out of anything, is gone. What remains is a man stripped of illusions, laid bare by his own decisions, and cornered by the truth he refused to face for too long. His downfall serves as a cautionary tale, not just for Salem's youth, but for anyone who believes reinvention alone can erase the past. Real redemption demands accountability, and sometimes, love must be expressed not through forgiveness, but through refusal. Now all of Salem watches the horizon. Philip remains in guarded condition, his fate, and the charges against Xander, still uncertain. The next 48 hours will shape what kind of justice Salem will pursue. Retribution, redemption, or something in between. As Xander waits in his cell, the silence around him speaks louder than any courtroom. The fall has happened. The reckoning has begun. And no matter what happens next, Salem will not be the same. Next, when love isn't enough, the tumultuous journey of Sarah Horton and Xander Kiriakis in a town like Salem, where secrets rarely stay buried and old flames never quite burn out. Love stories often travel a winding, perilous road. Few romances, however, have weathered as many storms or left as much wreckage in their wake as the ever-turbulent relationship between Sarah Horton and Xander Kiriakis. From scandalous beginnings to unbearable heartbreak, from disappearances and betrayals to reconciliations and weddings, their story is as much about survival as it is about love. But with the latest betrayals bringing back haunting memories, many are left asking, is history repeating itself? 2018 to 2019. An unexpected connection. When Sarah Horton returned to Salem in 2018, viewers were eager to see the next chapter in the life of the bright, compassionate daughter of Maggie Horton. At the time, she seemed headed for stability, engaged to dependable Rex Brady. But in typical Salem fashion, peace was fleeting. Sarah's world came crashing down when she discovered Rex had been unfaithful. Hurt and betrayed, she found herself in a vulnerable place. And in a moment of confusion and emotional pain, she sought comfort in the arms of Xander Kiriakis, a man as dangerous as he was charismatic. It was a decision that would alter the course of both of their lives. Soon after, Sarah learned she was pregnant. But the child was not Xander's, it was Eric Brady's. Yet, fearing further heartbreak and not wanting to complicate things for Eric, Sarah insisted that Xander pose as the father. In doing so, she gave Xander something he'd never had before. A glimpse at the kind of love and family he'd always believed were out of reach. 2019 to 2020, tragedy and deception. The bond between Sarah and Xander deepened during her pregnancy. For a moment, it seemed Xander might truly leave behind his past as a criminal and find peace as a father and partner. But fate had other plans. In one of Salem's most heartbreaking twists, Sarah's baby girl, Mackenzie Mickey Horton, tragically died shortly after birth. Xander, desperate to spare Sarah from the unbearable pain of losing a child, made a fateful decision with Victor Kiriakis. They secretly swapped Sarah's deceased baby with the living daughter of Kristen DeMera and Brady Black. It was a move driven by love, but one rooted in deception. Unaware of the truth, Sarah continued to raise baby Mickey, bonding deeply with the child she believed was hers. Eventually, Xander proposed, and Sarah, full of hope for a fresh start, accepted. But on what should have been the happiest day of their lives, their wedding day, the dark truth emerged. Sarah learned that Mickey was not her daughter. She was not even alive. The pain of the loss, compounded by the betrayal from the man she had come to trust, shattered her. Sarah called off the wedding, ending their relationship and walking away from Xander, who was left to face the consequences of his desperate act. 2020 to 2021. Kidnapping, impersonation, and identity crisis. Just when Sarah began to reclaim her life, another twist plunged her into a nightmare. Kristen DeMera, driven by her own warped motivations, kidnapped Sarah and held her captive on a remote island. In a cruel ploy, Kristen used a mask and impersonated Sarah, staging a breakup with Xander to ensure he wouldn't come looking for her. While Xander spiraled, believing Sarah had chosen to leave him again, the real Sarah was being drugged and manipulated into believing she was someone else entirely. Renee Dumond, a long-deceased woman from Salem's past. The drugs warped her mind, her memories, and nearly her identity. Eventually, Sarah was rescued. But the recovery process was slow and painful. Regaining her sense of self and piecing her memories back together was a long, uphill battle. Xander, to his credit, never gave up on her completely. And slowly, painfully, they found their way back to each other. 2022, reunion and marriage against all odds, Sarah and Xander reconciled. After everything, the lies, the loss, the kidnapping, they chose to begin again. For longtime viewers who had watched their relationship swing from disaster to devotion and back again, their reunion felt hard-earned and deeply moving. In a quiet, emotional ceremony, Sarah and Xander finally said, "I do." It wasn't the lavish wedding either had once imagined, but it was filled with genuine love and hard-won hope. For the first time in years, they looked toward the future, not with naivety, but with the shared knowledge of everything they had survived. 2023, parenthood and more secrets. Their happiness was soon tested once again. At the funeral of Victor Kyriakis, Xander's uncle and a towering figure in Salem, Sarah went into labor and gave birth to a daughter, Victoria Horton Kyriakis. But in a haunting echo of her past, Sarah once again chose deception over honesty. She named Rex Brady as the father of her child, hiding the truth from Xander. The truth eventually came out, not through Sarah's confession, but because Chloe Lane overheard a private conversation and exposed the lie. The fallout was immediate. Xander was devastated. Not only that Sarah had kept his own daughter from him, but that she had trusted Rex with such a monumental secret. What followed were tense custody battles, arguments over trust, and fresh wounds layered atop old ones. Though Xander loved Victoria fiercely, his relationship with Sarah became increasingly strained. 2024 to 2025. Trust, betrayal, and the shadow of the past. The year that followed tested them once more. As history began to repeat itself, Sarah discovered that Philip Kyriakis had stolen half of Xander's inheritance. An act that, if revealed, could have set off another round of violence and vengeance. Fearing what Xander might do, Sarah kept the secret. She thought she was protecting him, but instead she was planting another seed of distrust. Meanwhile, Xander, driven by old ambitions and questionable alliances, tried to regain access to University Hospital under false pretenses. His goal was to gain leverage through a new experimental drug, Sarah believing he was cheating on her again. Both emotionally and ethically confronted him. The confrontation was bitter and accusatory, reopening every wound between them. The love they once fought so hard to preserve now hangs by a thread. Their shared history, so full of passion, tragedy, and second chances, now threatens to become a cautionary tale. Is history repeating itself? For those who've watched Salem's many tangled romances over the decades, the question is painfully familiar. Can two people who've hurt each other so deeply ever truly move forward? Sarah and Xander have defied the odds before. They've come back from betrayal, from lies, from near death, and even from forgetting who they are. But the cycle of secrecy, deception, and mistrust may now be too deeply embedded to undo. Xander's instincts for control and Sarah's fear of vulnerability have collided too many times. Each new secret mirrors an old one. Each act of protection feels like betrayal. Each reconciliation leaves a scar. Looking forward, what lies ahead for Sarah Horton and Xander Kyriakis is anyone's guess. Will they finally break free of the patterns that have defined their love story, or will the weight of their past bury their future? For now, the streets of Salem whisper what they always do in times of crisis: that love is never easy, and forgiveness is never guaranteed. But sometimes, against all reason and experience, hearts that have been broken still reach for each other. And perhaps, just perhaps, this love story isn't finished yet.